Hi, folks. Welcome back to Live Impact News. As we mentioned before we went to break, we're going to talk a little politics, specifically North Carolina politics, and basically looking at the political landscape right now as it stands. We've got Anderson Clayton joining us from the North Carolina Democratic Party. Thanks so much for being with us.
Happy to be here.
Well, let's go ahead and start things off. And I did want to touch on somewhat a local topic for us here in the Mecklenburg County area, because we did see this kind of happen over the course of a few days. But essentially, bottom line is we've got two state representatives. We see Carla Cunningham and Nassif Majid, who have now left the Democratic Party. They've changed their affiliation to unaffiliated. And we did recently sit down with one of them. Majid talked about what he saw as his concerns with the Democratic Party and how he believes he was treated. So we actually have a little snippet of our interview with him. We'll share that. And I do want to get your take right on the other side of that.
The Democratic Party left me. They censored me. This is something unheard of, unprecedented. They censored me. They spent over $500,000 against me for a campaign to get TV ad.
So he's using the phrase, censored. We hear, from him, and we've heard from Cunningham as well. I guess a sentiment you might say that if they broke at all with the Democratic Party, that you're kind of out. I mean, that's how they kind of characterize it. Do you have a response to that?
We had Democratic legislators this year that chose to override our Democratic governor's veto. And when you have a Democratic governor that's elected by the largest margin in our North Carolina state's history by 15 points, we need legislators in districts that are overwhelmingly represented by Democrats to stand up. And honestly, I'm glad to see that Representative Rodney Sadler is coming into the legislature next year. I'm happy to see Representative Valeria Levy is coming into the legislature next year, because their districts also said that they wanted representatives who were going to back up what their districts actually were asking for. And it's representatives that are willing to uphold our Democratic governor's veto. And, I thank them for their service, but I hope they remember that coming into this session right now that we currently sit in.
I mean, you mentioned the veto. Any sort of concerns that this might put a veto override in play a little bit more than, what we've been seeing in the last few months?
Right now, the bills that are on the table to be overridden are bills that would ban diversity, equity, and inclusion right now in higher education and across K through 12 education in North Carolina. And I think our legislature has a lot more problems to focus on, like actually passing a budget, than preventing diversity, equity, inclusion in our school systems. And so if that's what these legislators choose to focus on, then again, I think their districts did the right thing.
Now, I know today you and some other folks were part of this press conference talking about Michael Whatley and also talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill. What was the takeaway from that press conference today? It sounds like you also had somebody who was impacted by this as well. What's your messaging on that front?
I mean, right now we've seen Republicans, and their only focal point in both Congress and in Raleigh is upping costs for North Carolinians across this state and across this country. And we've seen that from the rising health care cost. Right now, state employees, which represent over 1 million people in North Carolina, that have seen the lack of a state budget impact both their raises this year, but also their health insurance costs this year. Health insurance premiums and their copays have doubled for state employees right now across North Carolina, not to mention the fact that everyday people have also seen their health insurance cost rise up to triple to quadruple the amount of money that they were originally paying last year for it. And we can't negate the fact that right now we have people like Michael Whatley who have invested stocks in big pharmaceutical companies that are benefiting from what Washington, D.C. has done by passing the BBB. And what that's looked like is actually allowing or not allowing for negotiations to happen when it comes to actually negotiating prices for pharmaceutical drug companies at the end of the day. What we saw under Joe Biden's administration in Congress was him taking on the fact that insulin was costing too high a month for people to actually access it who needed it to. And so they came in and negotiated with drug companies to bring the cost of insulin down to $35. What the BBB has done is prevented people from having that access with certain drug companies. Those drug companies are the exact ones that Michael Whatley currently has stocks in. And we need to ask ourselves as North Carolinians, do you want that type of person right now representing you in Congress, someone that's going to benefit from off the backs of yourself? Or do you actually want someone who has made his entire career standing up to the people who are taking advantage of you? And that would be our Governor Roy Cooper right now.
We want to mention, too, for folks who are watching here right now, we reached out earlier today to Michael Whatley's team to get a response to some of the criticisms you're hearing from the Democratic Party. So we are still waiting to hear back. We were promised a statement, so that's something that's apparently in the offing, but we've not yet seen that released. So, of course, when we get that, we'll pass that along to folks.
And I'd love for Michael Whatley to say that he's willing to trade off every single current stock that he owns right now, because we don't believe that people that are representing us in Congress should actually have individual stocks, because you have information that the average everyday American simply does not.
I was actually going to ask about that because, you know, your criticism there about Whatley specifically is really more playing, I feel like, into a larger topic we're seeing in the political landscape right now as we watch the stock market go on kind of a wild ride with whatever the news of the day is. And so I am seeing a lot of headlines that are now starting to focus more and more on which politicians have been making the most money as the stock market has been going up and down. By the way, we do have a look at the big board. It's down right now. We've got some influences right now on investors based on the war in Iran, as well as some of the Fed news today, keeping those rates stable. So that said, how do we fix this problem, if there is a problem indeed, with trading and having inside information when it comes to folks who are in politics?
You ban anyone in government who has access to it from trading stocks, and that's exactly what Roy Cooper has pledged to do when he goes to the U.S. Senate. But I also think we have to have that across the board. You don't need a president right now who's got his family members that are benefiting from decisions that he's making. And I think that everybody across North Carolina and across the country, quite frankly, cares about political corruption, and that's exactly what they're seeing both in Washington, D.C., and in my opinion also in Raleigh right now.
So obviously we've seen here, recently today, a lot of talk during our conversation about Cooper and Whatley. We know that's going to be a huge race, and it will be nationally watched. So we know it's going to be a big spend race too. Anything that you're seeing on the front as we look ahead to November, and how things are going fundraising wise, support wise, what does the political landscape look like based on some of your polling and surveying you're doing?
Look, it's exciting on the ground right now. I just got back. I was in Rockingham County last night, and I was in Stanley County the night before that. And people everywhere are just excited about Governor Cooper. But we're making sure that we're organizing across all 100 counties in North Carolina, because we don't just want to be a party that cedes ground anywhere to the Republicans this year, where we have an opportunity to engage across all 100 counties. And so we're looking at the opportunities not just at the top of the ticket, but also down ballot. And so you all have a very important state Supreme Court election on your ballots this year too. And we can talk all day long about education funding and the lack of it from Republicans right now towards our teachers' salaries from the lack of a state budget that they've passed. But we could also go into the fact that our state Supreme Court earlier this year denied the Leandro decision that would have fully funded our public schools and forced the legislature to allow for that funding to actually happen. And so we have to make sure that we're looking at that ballot this year and that race on the ballot this year for Justice Anita Earls, who's going to be on there for each and every single one of you. And I just highly, highly, highly encourage everyone to look at those races, because oftentimes people tend to not vote in our judicial races because they don't understand how they impact them. And our judiciary right now is impacting every voter across North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I did want to talk about, voter engagement, if you will, because based on a lot of the headlines that I'm seeing lately, and, we've had a lot of developments on redistricting fronts when it comes to multiple states over the last few months, that there seems to be a growing positive sentiment amongst Democrats that there will be, seats to pick up, and this is going to go great for Democrats. Do you ever feel like, that might not come to fruition if folks feel complacent with that?
I mean, I think it's our job to get out there and make sure that we knock the doors to ensure that people don't get complacent, because I know that this year, we have one of the most gerrymandered state legislatures in the entire country, and I'd fight Texas, I'd fight for on that every single day. And I think that it is the opinion of our party right now that we have to have a long-term strategy in North Carolina to eventually make sure that people actually know that one vote is going to be one vote per person in this state. And right now, Republicans have gerrymandered both our state legislature, our congressional maps in North Carolina, and it's made it hard to win elections. But we also know that people everywhere across our state are pissed off, quite frankly, at the fact that Washington, D.C. is taking advantage and not addressing their everyday problems like we need them to. And to be honest with you, people across North Carolina who have never wanted to listen to a message from a Democrat are finally opening up their ears, because they understand that their own party's been taking advantage of them for far too long. And they're seeing it right now with gas prices and a president that's refused to take on and actually solve the problems of everyday North Carolinians.
The topic you brought up a few moments ago about education. That's probably a great one to maybe jump on next, just because we are seeing, on the timing front, in a couple of days, we have multiple school districts here and across the state that are going to be canceling class essentially for the students. We've got optional teacher work days so that teachers can go to the state's capital and basically push for funding. And I don't know if I've seen anything like that, in my time here in North Carolina, where we have classes that are being canceled, like widespread. What's your take on the situation?
My sister is a 7th grade science teacher, and right now I think everybody is angry at the fact that we cannot get to an agreement, that our legislature, our Republicans that control both our state house and our state senate, have refused to come to an agreement on how much they want to pay our teachers across this state. And to me, that's a travesty when the majority of our economic foundation in most of our rural communities right now, the backbone of that ends up being our public school systems. And so we have an obligation, an opportunity to, I think, our economies across rural North Carolina to get this done and to get this done right. And as of right now, teachers are finally starting to say, you know what, we've had enough. And if it means that we've got to take a day to come to Raleigh to let y'all know how serious we are about the fact that we deserve better right now, then we're willing to take that risk and take that chance and do that.
Any other, big impacts of not having the state budget? Because, we have heard Governor Stein in different appearances touch on, for example, one day I believe he was talking about law enforcement, obviously teachers. What are the other impacts that you think that we're really feeling because of this lack of new state budget?
I mean, again, when you think about, we're a state of 11 million people, and when 1 million people in a state right now question whether or not that they're going to have what they need and be able to make ends meet, and they're seeing their health care cost rise, they're seeing their insurance premiums double. I mean, it really is impacting everybody else in this state too. And I don't know somebody in North Carolina, in particular in rural North Carolina, that doesn't know a public school teacher right now that's not suffering because our Republicans in our state legislature just can't do their jobs. And it's been over 300 days, and they kept saying after a primary will happen, we'll get this figured out. And I'm like, well, we're still waiting. And it seems like that the only thing that they're curious about doing is figuring out who's going to duck first. And I'm like, that is not necessarily responsive to the people of North Carolina right now. And so I really hope that they're going to come to Raleigh and do their jobs and make sure that they're funding health care like we need them to with our Medicaid rebates, and also making sure that teachers and public employees in North Carolina get the raises that they're owed.
Just want to reiterate for folks, I know that we touched on a lot of different topics, but we are still waiting for that statement from Michael Whatley's camp. So if we get that here within the next 10 minutes as our stream is on, we will certainly bring that to you here on Live Impact. Otherwise, we'll try to get that for you in later newscasts here as we keep it here on WCNC Plus, or even in our evening stream, which is at 7. Anderson Clayton with North Carolina Dems, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
All right. Folks, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back in 2 minutes with more.